Good morning, everybody. It is 11 o'clock. Welcome to Flow Academy. Our class today is all about the buyer presentation. We are so glad that you are all here. Those of you watching live and, of course, the recorded version as well. Nicole, can you remind us, before I get started, for those who have not gone on Workplace or not super familiar, how do you get any of the classes, not just today's class, but any of the classes that we've seen, that we've recorded in the past, off of Workplace?
Yeah, so once you log into Workplace, there's going to be a menu on the left-hand side, and I believe it's the second or third thing listed called the Knowledge Library. And you'll go in there, and it's posted in chronological order. So the last class we did will be at the top. You can click that, and then once you get inside, you have the option to view the class. And then you can also download it if you wish. And then there's another area called Documents that has anything that we've talked about that you can maybe fill out or download for future reference.
Exactly, and that's going to be important today because we along that line in this class, we're going to be talking about the buyer process, but we've got some documents in there to help support that, so you don't have to feel like you necessarily have to take notes, or if you're in your car or whatever. So anything you wanted to add to that, Kevin, before we get started?
So that form is called the initial buyer meeting form, and it's in the form. It's in the information area, as well as it's going to be connected to the video. The document is connected to the video of this class as well. So everything's together in one place.
Okay, good. So yeah, the initial buyer meeting is what we're going to be talking about today. Next week, I think we talk about listings. So today we're talking about buyers. And one of the things that we want to kind of cover within this context is to have an actual buyer's meeting. It's really common for people to pick up a lead, maybe through the internet or a friend or whatever it is, and just start meeting them at a property and just kind of launch into this thing with kind of maybe a lot of assumptions being made about the process and what they know, what they don't know, and all that stuff. And we really want, just like everything that we're doing, we really want you to work on having a plan and having a process to what you're doing, so that there's consistency, not only for your client, but also for you and how you are presenting things, and things don't get left out.
That's right. It is so important. And you've heard this in all of our presentations. What Flow Academy is all about is process. And when you tell somebody, I'm excited to be working with you, but I want to take you through my process, really lets them know that you are a professional. You've thought through the way that you work. And when they understand what that process is, it's really important. And one of the things that we're going to talk about through this is creating those boundaries and really understanding that this is when we can talk. This is the way I work, and those types of things. Putting that out in the very beginning creates a much happier relationship with your buyers through the process if you set all these things up at the very beginning.
Exactly.
So the first thing you want to do is to have, and it's really best, if possible, to meet in person. And what I like to do is, especially if I haven't met them before, if I can have them into the office, great. I think COVID has changed that for a lot of us. But one of the things that I like to do is, if I meet somebody, say at a Starbucks or at a coffee place, kind of a place that's easy for everybody to get together at, is a good place to meet, because you're on, kind of neutral territory, neutral turf. I don't like to meet at a property that somebody wants to see. I want to create some rapport first, which is really important. And we're going to talk a little bit about the rapport questions and getting to know somebody. But I learned this tip when I went through a ninja selling installation. I love this idea from my trainer, Terry. If I meet somebody at a Starbucks, I always have a couple of Starbucks gift cards, like $10 gift cards, with me. If I happen to show up and the client has already purchased a coffee, I will tell them, "Hey, I'm so excited to meet you. I'd hoped to buy your first cup of coffee. Here's a gift card so that the next one's on me." And the idea is, if you give somebody something, then they feel that they want to do something in return. So when you build that connection, it's building that rapport by giving them something. It's starting to create that rapport.
Exactly. And the rapport, remember, what we're always talking about here is know, like, and trust. And so the like part comes from a lot of that starts to happen right now at this rapport question building. So using your Ford tactics, right, that we've talked about in the past, family, occupation, recreation, dreams, not all of those, not necessarily in that order, but basically open-ended questions where we're just talking about themselves, and time of possession should be 80% them, 20% us, or maybe even less than that if we can, when we're talking about building rapport. Now,
Rick, tell me more about that.
yeah,
That's
exactly. So that's the question that Kevin and I love all the time. Somebody says whatever they say, and you can, and you want to be authentic about what you're saying, right? But it's a super great way to get a deeper version of what they just said. Tell me more about that. I'm curious about that. Some version of tell me more goes a long way.
And it's so important as well, you know, coming into this meeting, you might be comfortable because you've done this 100 times. You may be, you know, a little nervous about it, which many of us are, and they're in the same boat. So really taking that time to take a deep breath and just get to know a little bit about each other, puts each other at ease, and then you can move into the business at hand.
And Kevin, that actually also brings up a really good point, which is it's, I think, super easy for us because we do this every day to make some assumptions around what people know and what they don't know, and using acronyms and, you know, MLS and, you know, whatever it is. And we really need to remember that they probably, we want, actually, I would say assume they don't know, right? So that you can ask questions and be curious about where they're at in their circumstances. And also I like the point, what you pointed out, where there's this maybe little bit of nervous anticipation that you may not pick up on, but it probably is inside of them that has some questions. And it's kind of our job to fetter that out, right? To set them at ease. And one of the great ways to do that is to, you know, use what we call research questions, and not make assumptions about where people are at.
And these questions, and this is a part of the list that you'll get that you can download, is really, you know, we talk about this. We're going to talk about it in the selling process as well. People will say things like, why is it that you want to buy a house now? Why is it that you want to sell a house now? And they may say something, but if you ask additional questions, you'll really get to the core of what the why is. And it's really important to keep asking questions and kind of drilling down to get to where that is. So some of the questions that you might want to ask for research is, you know, what's your current living situation? Are you renting? Do you own a home? Those types of questions. And what's the motivation for you to be buying a home now? And really drilling into that. It might be, you know, we're upsizing. It might be we're empty nesters now, so we're downsizing. And really getting into those questions about why is going to help you serve them better. And you want to let them know that. The more I know, the better I'm going to be able to serve you.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing about knowing their big why around this is that we all know that the process of buying a house can be, not necessarily always, but can be challenging. It can take a long time. The escrow itself, even once you get an offer accepted, can have its challenging times. And sometimes people can get wrapped around the axle around little things that you and I know, looking back, are not that big of a deal. Like the hot water heater needs to be replaced and the seller's not willing to, you know, do anything about it, for example. And if we can go back to their big why, I know that you wanted to buy this house because you've got that 5-year-old that's going into kindergarten and you really wanted to be in this school district. And that was really the most important thing to you. And is that still going on for you? And reconnecting their desire of buying the house to their big why, rather than, because then all of a sudden the hot water heater becomes not as big of a deal, if I'm making myself clear. So the more we can understand what's driving them and their feelings around that and what's important about that, and tell me more, the easier it's going to be for us down the road. Plus, the more they're going to get that we are connected to them. Right.
That's right. So two more points to make about research questions is they can be divided into two groups. First time buyer is going to have a whole different set of questions than somebody that has purchased in the past. And so part of what we want to get into for the first time buyer is really talking about, this is where our process becomes really important, is to really help them understand how much you know about the process of buying. Who have you talked to, you know, those types of things, and really taking them through not just your process, but the process of actually purchasing a home. And again, you have to assume that they know nothing. And that's the best way to kind of do it. Then the next part is somebody who's purchased before. And what's important to do with those buyers that have purchased before is, hey, what went well with your last purchase? What didn't go so well? What are you looking for to change in this process, and really understand how that went for them so that you can make adjustments if you need to. You understand what their expectation is. They understand what your process is, and it's going to make it that much easier. So in the form that we have in Knowledge Library, it really goes through that for the first time buyer, for the person who's purchasing for a second, third, fourth, fifth time, what those questions look like.
Yeah, and I would just add to that too. And for those of you who are second quarter with us, you didn't get a chance to, but the 4 agreements, one of the 4 agreements is don't make assumptions. You're hearing Kevin and I say it over and over again, but even if somebody has purchased a home, even multiple times, don't assume that they know what they're doing, right? Because they've done it once or twice, or even if they've done it 5 times, they still don't have the same experience that you do. So you want to still be taking care of them, in that don't assume that they know what we're talking about.
That's right.
Let's talk about the buyer package, Kevin.
So the buyer package is something that's really, it's not crucial to have a buyer package. I just think it's really important. And it gives information to the buyer that helps them understand kind of your process, fluff information about you, which is always important. And I think most real estate companies provide a buyer package in some format that you can put together and that you can personalize to really make important to you. So I think it's important for you to have some kind of a leave behind that they can then look at, and you know what happens in a meeting. You talk about all these things, and probably 70, maybe 60, 70% is retained. So the buyer package is
you think it's that high, Kevin?
I would hope
not if I'm in the meeting, it's probably 30%.
Hey, 10% for Rick. But it's important to be able to leave something behind so that they can kind of look at it and say, oh, that's right, Rick told me about that. There it is.
A couple other things we might want to have in there is the purchase agreement. Yep. And going over that with them, especially if they've never bought a home before. They've heard the term probably, we wrote an offer, we submitted an offer, but they have really no idea what that actually means. And you don't necessarily have to go through every detail of the contract there, but showing them what it looks like and the things that we're going to be thinking about and what's important. It also gives you a chance to kind of display your expertise around how you get an offer accepted in a challenging market, for example. So a little bit of not salesmanship necessarily, but certainly you having the ability to go, hey, let me flex for you a little bit here and show you some of the cool things I know how to do to help you get your offer accepted in an otherwise tough market. And then the other thing is a buyer broker agreement. Now, I know that I bet most of you do not use a buyer broker agreement. I rarely use a buyer broker agreement. So you say, well, why would you even have it in there? 2 reasons. Number one is, for me, I think I really want to add a buyer broker agreement. Just out of the process itself and being more professional. I think it's more professional to have a buyer broker agreement. The other thing is it gives you a chance to take them through the process of what they can expect from you and what you expect from them in return. One of the biggest challenges that we come up with, and especially if you're a newer agent, is the loss of people who you thought were your clients, right? I went to an open house. I called my clients. They said, "Oh, we went to an open house and we bought over the week. Aren't you excited for us?" Because they don't even know how the process works, right? Or you spend 6 months with somebody and then they decide to let their mother, their newly licensed mother-in-law, handle the transaction, even though they've done nothing. So it's helping them understand how you get paid. Remember, a lot of these people have no idea how we get paid, and I think a lot of us hide from the fact that we get paid and how much we get paid. So this is an opportunity to have that conversation with them as well.
I agree. And I just had a conversation in our accountability group with one of our fellow academates who got into a situation where it was a lead that came in, just kind of a cold lead, and got through the process, got the guy into contract. It was time to put in the deposit, and he disappeared. And I think that when you do sign that agreement, there is a little bit more, it's formalizing the relationship and the intention on both sides of what you have going forward. Would that have changed the situation? Probably not, maybe not. But it's one of those situations with a lot of people that it does put into writing that, hey, I'm choosing to work with you. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I think just one last thought on that, especially if you have somebody that you don't have any kind of connection with, that there may be, it's like this, I don't know if this doesn't feel like, maybe it's an internet lead or something like that. It gives you a chance to kind of fetter out how serious they're. In other words, if you're asking them to sign something and they're reluctant, it'd be a good reason to be curious. Hey, I'm curious, but I'm giving you this. You're not really tied to anything unless you're intending to not buy. What am I missing? What's going on here, right? And having that little deeper conversation with them. It could save you a lot of hours.
That's right. So I think it's important when you are talking to, especially a first-time buyer, for them to understand what sources you are going to be looking at. And the list that we have here is obviously the multiple listing service, new construction, and explaining that oftentimes new construction is not on the multiple listing service. And also explaining to them the importance that if you find a new construction building, for most new construction, you need to be with your agent for your first showing. And if not, you're not going to get paid. And I think that explaining to them that if you come across a new construction property or I find one for you, it's important that that first meeting is with us together. FSBOs is another one for sale by owner to say we are going to put that into our search. Will they come up? Maybe not on multiple listing service, but we just want them to be aware that those are available and that we want to be there to represent them if they find one. Off markets, coming soons. These are all sources, especially the off market and coming soons. Gives you the ability to say that I know of these properties, and it makes them realize that having you as my agent is allowing eyes on properties that I may not see just looking on my own.
Yeah, and I want to circle back on the new construction thing. Probably the button to also push is not only do we not get paid, but almost more importantly, I think probably actually more importantly, is they won't have us to be there to represent them and help them navigate through that process. And so that's the other challenge around not having us at new construction. And I don't know about you guys, I've definitely had that happen where I've had somebody I've worked with. I never had a conversation with them about new construction. They ended up at a place without telling me, and it was too late, and I lost them after having done a bunch of work. And even they were bummed about it had they known. Well, it's my responsibility to let them know. It's one more reason that these buyer meetings are so important.
Good point, Rick.
Okay. So the where are you in the process question is, again, an open-ended version of tell us where we're at, how can we serve you next?
Yeah, and I love using the question on a scale of 1 to 10. If you found the perfect property today, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I'm going to move on it right now, to 1, I'm just kind of starting to look. By giving them that question, it's going to help you judge and gauge exactly where they are. I have clients that we just got into contract this weekend that I met with for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and they're like, we think we want to buy probably within the next year. And this is how quickly it happened. And I did ask that question, and it was on a scale of 1 to 10. They said maybe a 2 or a 3, unless the right thing shows up. And so I said, tell me more about that. And it got us to the point that I realized that I need to put these as hot clients, not warm clients, because they are ready to move. So really getting that understanding is going to help your communication with those clients as well.
Okay, so let's talk about the communication part and the list, right? Kevin, this is something that you've done really successfully. So tell us about the list.
So I love this. If you're working with a couple, I just love this, especially if you have them in person. I've done this with people on Zoom too. It works either way, but they need to be together and you sort of need to be with them. And what's interesting, if you ask a couple, what are the 3 top things that you need in this house? Or let's do a list of must-haves and want-to-haves. They'll start talking and you think it's kind of going to be the same thing. What I like to do is give each of them a sheet of paper and say, okay, I want you to write down 3 of your must-have things for this new home and 3 or 4 things that you would really like to have, and then other things that you want to have. And you give them a little time to write these things down. You tell them no cheating. You need to do this on your own. And it's really surprising how different these lists can be. So that's an issue. This person says, I have to have 3 bedrooms. This one says, I only need 1 bedroom. This one says, I need outdoor space. This one says, I need storage. So it's really taking those lists and bringing the couples together to say, in a unified way, what is it that we're really looking for?
Yeah, the what and why, right? The other thing I like to insert somewhere in there when we're talking about their desires, it's 2 things. One is I will point out, I totally get that you guys want a cute house. I don't have a search criteria for that. So it's not, and it's very subjective. So in other words, honing them down to the difference between us having this conversation of what you want and what you like versus how we can actually put things in front of you. I'm always talking about, we want to cast a really wide net with the minimum parameters of houses that make sense from a kind of a logistical standpoint. And then all of the little things like the tree with the swing in front, the white picket fence, whatever it is, those are things that are going to pop to you or not by seeing them online. The other thing I like to point out is it's quite often that our desires and our wants that we think going into the process naturally evolve. And if we were to line up, if we took the meeting of what I really want to what people often end up with is quite different. And it's not because they've been convinced to do something else or anything like that. It's that what they want changes in the process of looking at things and seeing them. So, but going into the what and why, Kevin, what's the story there?
Well, it's looking at the features versus the benefits. And you said it, people will say, I really want a swimming pool. Well, that would be more down here in the desert, but I really want a swimming pool. And if you get into the why do you need the swimming pool, you realize that, yes, it is really something that they want, or it's something that they think that they need to have. And the idea of the why is much more important than the what. Good example that I think we've all maybe dealt with is we need to have 3 bedrooms. Okay, if you leave it at that, then your assumption is we need 3 bedrooms because maybe there are kids or guests or whatever. But if you come into why 3 bedrooms and they say, well, we need a place that's kind of like a home office. Well, now you're looking at something different because maybe you're looking at a property that has a little loft area that could be made into an office or whatever. So it's really understanding the why, the benefit of it, as opposed to the what or the feature of it.
Exactly. I'll give you another example that happens all the time, especially from a country property area. For those of us who are in that, is I get people that are like, yeah, I need lots of land. And I go, oh, what does lots of land mean? Oh, and they have no idea sometimes what that even means. But let's say that they say 2 acres, and they go, great. Tell me why you need 2 acres. Is it, because I want to know, are we growing something? Are we are we going to have animals? Do you want to ride dirt bikes? Like, what's the story? And sometimes the answer is, I want privacy. Oh, so you don't need 2 acres. You just want to be able to be naked in the backyard, and you don't want anybody to see you or whatever it is. And yeah, that's right. So if we had the right house that wasn't 2 acres, but it was private, would that work? Oh yeah, definitely. So it's helping them understand or drill down on their why, like Kevin's point, so that we can help them navigate. So in other words, those people, had I just left it at that, would have been left with, we're only showing them 2 acre properties, right? Okay. Cash, loan, house to sell. What's our circumstances? What are we dealing with here?
Yeah, this is all important to know up front. Obviously, cash buyer is going to change the dynamic than a loan property in today's market. And if there's a house to sell, we don't want to jump into right now saying, oh, I can take care of that. That's taking us off topic. What we want to focus on right now is you, the buyer, and really stick with that. We're going to get to if you have a house, I would like to represent you on that. But let's get through the majority of this meeting first as the buyer, and not jump into, hey, opportunity for me to sell as well.
Unless it's driven by them. In other words, I'm meeting with somebody tomorrow And that was the thing they said, can you help me sell my house and buy my, of course, then we want to talk about it. But
Yeah.
Kevin's point is, don't just go, aha, another opportunity and go and kind of jump into that without focusing on why you're meeting with them in the first place.
That's right. So this is another great one. We all know what active contingent, pending, we know that. And we can't assume, as we said in the beginning of this class, we can't assume that everybody understands what that is. So active contingent is a really important one, that people understand what that means. Down in the valley, contingent, continue to show, there are different, depending on the multiple listing service that you're in, it might be different things. But to really help your client understand what those things are on the multiple listing service, because they're going to be seeing that. So you want to explain that upfront so that it's not a surprising thing for them as they start searching.
The other thing I like to talk about too in this part of the meeting is two things. One is foreclosures, and it doesn't come up as much anymore. And obviously we hardly have any foreclosures, but Zillow has pre-foreclosures that we, occasionally will get calls on. And of course, you guys know what that is. These are people that have 90-day, have missed their mortgage for 90 days and have notice of default has been filed. They're not about to sell their house. It's not it's fake, right? It's a way for Zillow to get eyeballs. But covering that up front with them, and even how foreclosures work, if there are even any, for 95% of the people, it doesn't apply to them, right? They have to have cash. They have to go to the auction. They have to do the thing. Of course, they're going to get any foreclosures that makes it all the way to an agent, and then it'll be the same way. And again, we don't deal with hardly any of those anymore, but I like having that conversation. And then the other thing that I thought was that I always, now I've completely forgot what my second thing was. Nicole, you knew as soon as I had two things, there's no way he's getting to the second one. If it comes back to me, I will come back. But there was one other thing on the status one. Anyway.
So now we start talking about the idea of how we're going to look at properties and talking about the process. And this is where you're really able to create the boundaries between both the buyer and you, back and forth, of how you're going to work. And you want to talk about what your hours are. I work only Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and I work appointments by weekends by appointment, or whatever that is. I take Friday off. Friday is my day off. And it's the time when you really help them understand that you are a working professional as well. You are allowed days off. You work, specific hours. And it's really kind of setting those parameters. And when you do that up front, it really saves a lot of trouble down the line. And so it really is setting those expectations and showing properties, understanding that appointments may have to be made. A lot of open houses are available to look at properties, and really for your specific market, explaining to them what that looks like. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Now I'm completely off, because I went back to, what did I forget? Even though I had something to say after what Kevin was talking about. So the boundaries is a really important issue. This is more for you than it is for them. It's definitely for them. But what Kevin and I are constantly coaching people on is, you are not available 24/7. And if this is something that you're saying to people, we need to stop saying that. It's an idea that you have that you think is important. Maybe you got it when you were a new agent. Maybe you are a new agent and you think it's important. 24/7 is not what you are, right? You are allowed to have boundaries. 9 to 5 might be a little bit tight, but not necessarily. But you can definitely say, hey, look, at 7 o'clock, unless it's an emergency, I'm returning those emails or text messages the following day. And here's when I'm available. Like Kevin said, having by appointment only lets them know you have to schedule it. I'm just not sitting there waiting by the phone on Saturday for you to call me at 9 going, which houses are we going to look at? So setting that expectation up front is really, and they will respect it.
You're right. It definitely absolutely creates more respect, and I think gives you, you're more of a professional when you do that than, hey, give me a call in the middle of the night and I'm happy to pick up, because that's just not going to happen. And I have much more, I can't call my doctor, at 8 o'clock in the evening and say, hey, I'm getting a little scratchy throat. I wouldn't even think of that, but it's one of those things I can leave a message or whatever. Maybe a bad comparison, but the idea is if you have set things, it's going to make much more sense. I also wanted to add another way of creating boundaries and really understand is, hey, what's our best way of communication? Do you prefer telephone calls? Is texting good? Emailing? What is the most comfortable way for us to communicate with each other? And putting that down and determining that right away is also important.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Nicole and I have a process. Typically, it's quite often that we have a husband and a wife, and Nicole and I, and we tell them we're going to set up a thread and we ask them if they're comfortable, because it is important. If they're not into texting, we don't want to force them into doing that. But we found most people are, and we set up a thread where all communications goes through when it comes to seeing a property. So, hey, I just saw this one popped up. When can we see it? What's the offer date? Is there a disclosure packet? It's super efficient. And then there's in our case, it's 2 sets of eyeballs looking at it. We know that one of us is going to get back to them and make sure that they get taken care of, rather than an email or a phone call. And people seem to really like that. So just a tip, if that's something you want to do, even if you're a single agent, even if you're helping just one person, text for a lot of people is the way they want to go. But when you start getting into multiple, when there's a husband and a wife, or a husband and a husband, or whatever, there's a couple, having it all on one thread saves you the hassle of, like, oh, Jim already told me about that. Oh yeah, and so forth. So that way it's all transparent is my point.
Good point.
Okay, what's next?
So what's next? So it's really saying, okay, we've had this meeting. So now it's kind of time for us to start touring properties, getting ready to look. We've talked about the source that we're going to be looking for new and available properties. And it is now really saying, okay, here's going to be our process. I know what your search parameters are. I'm going to set you up on a search. And we're going to start looking at houses. So it's kind of like, are there any other questions? Is there anything that we need to talk through? Is there anything that you don't understand at this point or want clarification on or whatever? And it's getting all of those things kind of set out. So now what's next? Now we start touring properties.
Yeah, and it's fun. And I think at this point, I really want to feel their excitement, and I want to match their excitement, right? Even though I'm not the one buying a house, they are. And I always like to tell people, this is exciting. Are you excited? This is going to be great. It's going to be fun. Are you, do you feel that way? Especially if you're not, and if they don't, it's a tell me more situation, right? What's going on? Are you nervous about something? Do you, and Nicole will hear me say this all the time. I tell people, hey, if we have this meeting and you're like, I don't really like that guy, it's okay. Just let me know so that we can, that we can move on. I give them permission to say no, right? So that there's that opportunity as well.
That's right.
All right. What about the roadblocks?
Well, I can't see that there could be any roadblocks in working with a new buyer. I think one of the most important things to do, though, is to really determine if you're on a team, if you're working by yourself, doesn't matter, what is our process? And I really think having a process in mind and being able to articulate that puts your clients at ease. They understand that and we have all done this, multiple times in the past, and this is the way that we work. I think puts them at ease and makes them understand that, I'm in good hands.
Yeah, I think that the other roadblock is kind of what we always talk about is if you are not doing these things now, it's that initial start of doing things differently that's going to be, that can be a little bit challenging. So that's, like anything, there's comfort. There's that idea of being stuck in what is uncomfortable, but it, versus going to the discomfort of unknowing, where there might be some relief of doing things differently and better.
That's right.
And pushing yourself into that place. Okay, so that wraps up our buyer presentation. Thanks for watching here. If you're watching the recorded version, thanks for watching. And we are going to go to questions now live.